Shalom, my dear confreres and friends, warm and cordial greetings to all of you from Lumen Christi Institute, Arusha, Tanzania. Today I am going to speak on consecrated life, a witness to hope in a pandemic world. Every year, 2nd February, the feast of the presentation of the Lord is celebrated as the day of consecrated life. The existential context of our consecrated life and ministry in the past 2 years is that of COVID-19 pandemic, which has become a catastrophe, overturning all our normality. It has made us fragile and has compelled us to live in isolation and fear. It has silenced science that did not know how to treat the virus and confined us to stay at home. Masks have become an essential part of attire. Traditional greetings like handshakes and hugging are replaced with the physical distance. Sanitizers have become an essential household commodity. Classrooms are replaced by virtual platforms. Like any other testing times, the most vulnerable and disadvantaged are being hit worse in this pandemic too. For it does not remain a health crisis alone, but a sustained issue at all levels, with a dreadful new normal to live with. The calamity of this proportion necessarily calls for a reimagining consecrated life to respond to the challenges and the needs of our time. St. Francis de Sales, our patron, reminds us that storms and turbulences in life are opportunities to return to the essentials and grow. He says, be careful to persevere your heart in peace and tranquility. Let the waves and storms beat about your bark without fear, for God is there. We need to give heed to what Pope Francis says in Fratelli Tutti, Article 35. How we respond to the signs of this time will prove whether or not the coronavirus pandemic will be a moment of change for better. Otherwise, he says, this can become just another tragedy of history from which we learned nothing. Therefore, we need to remember that we are amid a highly teachable moment, even though most people might want to consign this year to the trash bin of history for its devastating consequences. In fact, it is a once-in-a-generation chance for this period will be referred to for the rest of our life, not only for its dark days, but also for the numerous vital lessons it offers to humanity. For these are ultimately situations that test our faith, our ability to preach the gospel as missionaries of St. Francis de Sales, with his promise full of hope. Pope, on the occasion of the year of consecrated life, reminded us that it is precisely amid these uncertainties which we share with so many of our contemporaries that we are called to practice the virtue of hope. What this reimagining of consecrated life would entail could be looked at from various angles, but I like to focus on the two essential elements of consecrated life, namely our relation to God and our mission from a Salesian perspective. Consecrated persons are owned by God. The centrality of consecrated life is that we are owned by God. Consecration makes us persons who are given to God without conditions. More concretely, it makes us living memories of Jesus' way of being and acting, of his obedience, poverty and chastity. It transforms us into the signs and communicators of God's love for humanity. This is the first contribution that we can and should offer as consecrated persons. Unfortunately, it is not recognized because a reductive anthropological model, very frequent today, robs from life its religious and consecrated dimension, building it on short-term projects. This is what happens with the myth of science, technology and economics, and the illusion that progress is unlimited, condemning existence to the immanence of this world without the horizons of a definitive transcendence, since everything ends with the death. To a world centered on efficiency and production, on economy and well-being, the religious represents himself or herself as a sign of God and his grace and love. Jesus came to give us God and his love. This is God's good news. It is God whom first and foremost we can give to humanity. This is the great hope that we can offer. It is, I think, our first prophecy. Owned by God, we have nothing to be afraid of. In fact, every situation demands of us not to be owned by the circumstances, but to use our union with God for transforming the situation. Again, St. Francis de Sales, our beloved patron, keeps us reminding us, do not look forward to what may happen tomorrow. The same everlasting Father who cares for you today will take care of you tomorrow and every day. Either he will shield you from suffering, or he will give you unfailing strength to bear it. Be at ease then. Put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginations, and say continually, the Lord is my strength, he is my shield, my heart trusts in him, and I am helped. He is not only with me, but in me, and I in him. He further states, if God were to take all from us, he will never deprive us of himself so long as we desire him. It is evident that this life centered on God and self-giving to others is clearly countercultural. It appears as a sign counter to the absolute value of money and materialism, counter to hedonism and body worship, counter to individualism and any form of authoritarianism. The pandemic has been a time of grace, introspection and conversion. There has been a shift from our mechanical way of life to live a more meaningful and purposeful life. It has made us resilient to cope with the hardships and uncertainties with a stronger faith. Being active in diverse ministries for building up God's kingdom had been the focus. The pandemic is a call for us to slow down, to stop, to reflect, to interpret reality from God's point of view. I think it is an opportunity to revisit once again and to reorient our life and mission from God's perspective. To achieve this, what is needed, I believe, is a commitment to a disciplined, contemplative life. Prayer and contemplation, as we know, are an absolute requirement for any committed Christian life, and they are certainly central to consecrated life. St. Francis de Sales reminds us that prayer is opening our understanding to God's brightness and light, and exposing our will to the warmth of His love. Nothing else purifies so well our understanding of His ignorance and our will of His sinful attachments. It is a spring of blessings, and it waters, quench the thirst of the passions of our heart, wash away our imperfections, and make the plants of our good desires grow green and bear flowers. By looking at Him often in meditation, your whole being will be filled with Him. You will learn His attitudes and model your actions on His, as we read from the introduction to devout life. However, our lives have become so busy, so task-oriented, so disconnected, that we have difficulty opening up a space for the divine. This means more than dashing off a quick prayer on the way to a meeting or after hearing a painful news, but finding that quiet place, settling our mind and quietening our souls. It means surrendering to God who is, to God who is love. It means remaining in that posture and letting God recreate us in that divine image in which God created us. It means saying yes to love. Thus, the first and most essential purpose of consecrated life is to be committed God seekers. Without a committed pursuit of God in contemplation, I believe all kinds of good service and activities lose the purpose and relevance. Ultimately, it is search for God in dailiness and the daily search for God in everything that marks a person consecrated. This all-important purpose of a single-minded search for God is again beautifully expressed by one of the writer, Joan Schitzer, when she says, "For the person who cannot find God here, staying here is a mistake. For the person who does not see God here, leaving here is an imperative. For the person who cannot see God better someplace else, living here is a grace." Now, I would like to focus on the second aspect of our consecration, namely mission. As we know, mission is an essential aspect of our consecration. We as a congregation, a part of the church's mission as a community of hope, in the line of St. Francis de Sales, chastity Paul, recalling the universal charity of Jesus, wrote, "You came to light the fire on earth, the fire of love of man for God, and then the fire of love of man among them." Even when we are grappling with a situation such as the pandemic, hope helps us to look towards the God and light this fire as we focus on three important aspects of our mission, namely fusion, vision, and passion. Fusion is our solidarity with the people we serve, which means that we enter fully into their way of feeling and thinking. For Francis reminds us to have the smell of the sheep. We are not living a parallel existence. If we are in solidarity with the suffering and immerse ourselves into their life, we will be challenged and disturbed. Vision is a result of a disturbance and reflection, and the goal becomes clearer. Passion, to achieve the goal, we must be ready to suffer. We must pass through a moment of crisis in our life. Only then we will have the vision and passion. St. Francis de Sales again reminds us that the fusion of vision and passion in mission is in fact the overflow of love experienced in contemplation. He says on the treatise of the love of God, it is one and the same love that produces the acts of the love of God and of one's neighbor. It is the same love that elevates us to the union of the soul with God and leads a living community with our neighbor. The love of God not only commands but creates the love of our neighbor. Yes, Jesus' experience of the oppressed poor became his fusion experience and led him to a vision of the kingdom and got him ready for the passion. I always liked the story from Anthony de Mello. On the street, I saw a naked child, hungry, shivering in the cold, but I became angry and I said to God, "Why do you allow this? Why don't you do something?" And God replied, "I certainly did something. I made you." In the context of the persisting pandemic, what specific mission can I do as MSFS to alleviate the pain and suffering of the people and to be a witness of hope amid hopelessness? Let me spell out following very few practical suggestions hopefully we can do in our mission. First, we can use techniques of telecommunication to proclaim the love and compassion of Christ in these challenging times. Second, we form groups such as Ambassadors of Hope and develop programs such as Pathways of Hope, Health for All, Grief Care, and so on. Third, every community could think of carrying out a social analysis of the locality where we are and prepare a plan of action to reach out to the needy, the vulnerable, and more disadvantaged. Fourth, we could strengthen programs for the poor children, dropouts, youth, unemployed, and mentally disturbed persons in the context of the pandemic, specifically helping them to avail various social schemes that are already in existence at the government level. Fifth, we can promote non-institutional, non-formal, popular educational efforts in collaboration with the national and international movements, getting support from NGOs and other organizations. Sixth, strengthening the counseling cell in our schools and organizing programs for students, staff and parents in coping skills, crisis management in order to help them face the challenges of the pandemic and other adversities. Seven, and making our infrastructure available to the most disadvantaged pandemic affected students of the locality who have no facility for online classes. I would like to end my presentation saying that when our contemplative union with the God flows into concrete deeds of love, like the ones I have mentioned just now, the ecstasy in action about which St. Francis de Sales speaks is initiated. Thus, we live Jesus through our consecrated life during these times of pandemic. May God bless you. Thank you to one and all.